It's hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field. Or the run rules on the diamond at Lowe's Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Let's go. It's the Mainline Podcast. Thanks so much for making us a part of your weekly tradition. You know me, Adam, and Tyler Burton, of course, and I'm sure everybody knows Eddie here, the special guest on this week's podcast and show here on YouTube. Eddie, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Gentlemen, good evening. Happy Masters Week to you. And I guess free football is definitely in full swing. So a lot going on, but I appreciate it. How's it going?
Doing good, Eddie. Where else would you rather be on a Tuesday night other than maybe Augusta, Georgia right now? But no, guys, excited to be on tonight's episode. There was no doubt whatsoever what color I was going to be wearing on this week's episode. It's my favorite week of the year in sports. I feel like a senior citizen at the Riverwind playing the slot machines, just with the amount of content that I've been liking and retweeting coming out of Augusta this week. I've listened to about 7 or 8 different golf podcasts since Sunday, and outside of the national championship on Monday, it's really just kind of been strictly Golf Channel on the TV. So again, excited about this week, even more excited about the spring game coming up here in just a couple of weeks. And Eddie, excited to have you on tonight. But before we get into spring football, do got to kind of get your pick on this, Eddie. Scotty or the field?
I mean, it's so hard to go against Scotty right now just because of just how fantastic he's been. Obviously entering this week in really good form, but I don't know, to ask a guy to win for the second time in 3 years. Certainly if there's anybody that can do it, it's almost to the point now where he's become such the odds-on favorite that if he does win, I think that we're going to start talking about him, maybe possibly being a generational player. He's already a generational kind of ball striker. Certainly I know the no laying up guys talked about the Grand Slam being on the table if he were to get through this weekend. And it's hard to go against him, but there's so many other guys out there right now. And there's always somebody at the Masters that, probably not playing as well or into form going into the weekend. And then all of a sudden you look up and they're in contention on, Sunday. So I guess if I had to take one or the other, I would probably take Scotty. I think he's playing that well right now, which is just insane. It's kind of crazy too. It's like John Rahm's just completely gone under the radar this week. I think a lot of it's pretty obvious because of the live stuff and just, you don't really know where his game's at. But he did play well last week at Doral and, It's just crazy. I think there's a small part of me that, truly hopes that Tiger's in contention, just makes the cut, does something to get those feels back. But at the same time, it would be awesome if, Scotty was trying to chase down Rory or, vice versa going into the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
So it's one of the best weekends of the year. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Sleeper pick, Adam, if any fantasy teams are out there. I'm taking Willie Z this week. If it's not going to be Scott, I'd love to see a guy like Will Zalatoris win it. Having an opportunity to follow him for a couple of days at the PGA Championship back in Tulsa a couple of years ago was a lot of fun. This is a second shot golf course at Augusta National, and Willie Z is one of the best iron players. Not quite as good as Scotty, but in today's age, nobody really is. That's how good Scotty Scheffler's been. But Eddie, let's get to spring football right here. Obviously, media access has been absolutely phenomenal for you guys this year. What a difference it makes. Coaching staffs, administrations, if you want to say, with Brent Venables at the helm and Mike Houck. But Eddie, let's dive into the trenches here a little bit, because in football, just in general, but especially over the course of an SEC conference schedule, you've got to be able to hold up at the point of attack. And I want to start on the offensive line here. It's no secret that this has been the most talked about question mark for this football team going into spring practice. You lose 3 guys to the NFL in the draft. McCade Matauer graduates, and then you lose, Caden Green, and what was probably one of the wildest transfer stories that we've seen come through Norman in quite some time. So ultimately, you're replacing all 5 starting offensive linemen. What's been your impression of this unit so far through spring practice? Because Bill Beanbo, he's got his hands full at the moment.
We'll start at the bottom and work our way up, I think. Wise. I mean, we talked about it on the Unofficial 40 today. It's something that we've talked about, here basically throughout the start of spring. And with everything that went into kind of what you outlined, just in terms of what they were losing, who they were replacing, it's not good right now. I don't know any other way to say it. It's not. I don't think they're not like the worst unit in the country. They're not the worst unit probably in the SEC. But when you're talking about Oklahoma and making the jump and, certainly where Oklahoma should be at an offensive line standpoint, even just simply from a number situation, they got a ways to go. And I think that they're going to be very active within the portal. The Troy Everett news, certainly, it's probably not the worst news possible, obviously, not losing him for the season or anything like that, but you're not getting him back until maybe the middle of August. And it's just, I don't think that Josh Bates is ready right now. And, I think that they're going to have to go into the portal, probably answer one of those, questions just in terms of getting some more bodies in there at the center position. I know they're, going to be happy with Josh Iasosa at some point in his career, but to ask a true freshman to walk in and just take over from day one is probably, you're a little naive if you think that would be a situation that would even be, halfway responsible in terms of putting the best offensive line onto the field. So it's not a good situation. And I think that, it's interesting because you look at the guard position and I think everybody feels pretty good about it. I think that Fabichi Uewu has been fantastic in coming in from North Texas. And on the other side, Heath Zeta is a guy that had a lot of buzz coming even in out of the back end of his freshman year a year ago. It sounds like he's had an excellent spring. I think that you could feel really, really confident about the guard position at Oklahoma. And then the tackle position is just strange. I think that like Spencer Brown, there was so much talk about he's going to be the Walter Rouse 2.0. And I think as of right now, that's just not the case. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see what they truly are able to get out of him. I think the times that we've been able to see him, I know he's running a lot of second team at right tackle. I do feel pretty good about the left tackle position. I think when Jake Sexton gets completely healthy, that's going to be a pretty healthy spot. Then you start working your way back into the depth at all of the positions. And I just don't think that they have the depth right now that they probably want. And that's not to say that they don't think that, Daniel Akinkunmi is going to be a fantastic player someday. He's a freshman. And that's where it gets a little bit worrisome. And, I think that like the bigger conversation that we had today too was just the fact that because the offensive line has been so up and down and a lot probably more down than ups throughout the spring, are you gauging on like how good of a spring Jackson Arnold is having? Is he making the developmental steps that are going to put this offense in place to be pretty damn good next year? Like I think there's a chance that could happen. That you look at the skill position guys, it's been fantastic when we've been able to see him out there. But I mean, it all starts up front, and I think that there's some real big question marks, even with a week and a half, 2 weeks left in spring ball.
Adam and I have had this question kind of going back and forth really ever since, the departures to the NFL draft, losing Caden Green. Oklahoma's almost kind of been afforded the luxury over the past years. I'm not saying that the Oklahoma offensive line has been bad. I mean, Bill Bedenbaugh, he's one of the best offensive line coaches in America, but playing in the Big 12 conference, that level of competition, it's almost kind of afforded Oklahoma the luxury of being able to maybe take 5 or 6 games to be able to figure out your starting 5 rotation, or maybe figure out who those top 6 or 7 guys are going to be. If you want to play musical chairs, you're not going to really be afforded that same luxury when you look at some of the, the stacked defensive line groups that Oklahoma's going to be facing week in and week out in the SEC. So that's going to be tough for, I don't want to say that, it puts any more pressure on Bill Bedenbaugh, but like you alluded to, Eddie, when you look at the skill talent, what Jackson Arnold has, kind of the toys that he's got to play with, the offensive line could be the difference between this possibly being a 6-7 win team this upcoming year, or possibly, trickling on the doorsteps of maybe reaching double digits. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Flip it over to the other side of the football. Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis's groups. I think everyone feels pretty good about the edge guys. You got Ethan Downs, the veteran in the room. R. Mason Thomas is probably as healthy as he's been in quite some time. PJ Adebawore, who, you guys have talked about on the unofficial 40, Eddie, it kind of feels like this Oklahoma fan base is just foaming at the mouth, waiting for him to take that next step. So we feel good about the edge, but inside is where the question mark lies. How those boys on the interior looked.
Man, I feel like, and we talked about this literally today on the podcast. It's one of those things that if they would have 2 more bodies inside, like interior defensive linemen with just a little bit of experience, like a multiplicity of what Jacob Lacey gave him a year ago, that medical retirement, obviously a terrible situation, but it just felt like it took such a hit to that interior, because now you're asking guys like a Jaden Jackson, guys like a David Stone to come in from day one and be contributors, not to mention guys that have been on campus to really make that next step, like make that next jump. And I think that Devon Sears and Grayson Halton have both had pretty good springs. Again, is that one of those things that, like, have they had a good spring because they really are having a good spring and they're making developmental moves and improving? Or is it a situation that the offensive line that they're going against every day is giving you a little bit of a false indicator on kind of where they are? Can they really truly be difference makers? I thought that Devon Sears, in the times that we've been out of practice, I think he looks really good physically right now. And Grayson Halton's a guy that I think that every year you've kind of like, since he's arrived on campus, there's been a little bit of buzz about him. He shows out in a couple games and then disappears. And, you would hope that is a culmination of somebody that's finally getting the game to slow down with him, and then he can go make plays this season. So I feel pretty good about it. I would feel a lot better. I would feel like this defense could be really, really good if they had a couple more guys inside. But then again, who's to say that, somebody like a Jaden Jackson can't come in from day one and be a difference maker, or a David Stone? Obviously, there's a lot of headlines and, a lot of expectations that come along with his arrival in Norman. So it's going to be really interesting to see what that interior group is, because you're right. Like, if you get outside of the interior defensive lineman, I think that they feel really confident with DJ Terry.
Yeah.
I love every other position group, and especially with the leadership positions, the guys that they're returning, whether it be a linebacker or cornerback or safety. It seems like those position groups are really, really good. It's just going to be pretty, predicated and kind of like the offense on what you can get from the interior, or just specifically the defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie, you and George have talked a lot already about Zach Alley and how his presence looks in practice, how it affects Brent Venables. But I'm curious about the other side and how Seth Luttrell is replacing Jeff Lebby there, and what differences you're noticing in how he's coaching Jackson Arnold and just the offense as a whole.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like when we're out there to go see practice, there's a lot of individual stuff. It's a lot of instructional stuff, which, I don't think is too much different from what we were able to see when Lebby was here. We haven't been able to see like team periods, which would be the most interesting part to me, just to see kind of what they're doing differently from maybe than what they were doing a year ago, and even more so what they were doing differently from a year ago when they were, getting ready for the Alamo Bowl. But, I love Seth Luttrell. I think he's pretty awesome just in terms of like his presence. Ultimate alpha guy, always got a chaw in. I like that in a football coach. He's like your typical football coach, a little bit of a hard ass, kind of intimidating a little bit. But, at the same time, I'm really excited to see what they're going to be able to marry just in terms of Seth Luttrell and what we know about him, what he's done previously at North Carolina and Indiana and North Texas and all the stops that he's made. And then marrying that with Bill Beatenbow and what they want to be able to do with the run game, or Joe John Finley and just kind of what he wants to be able to do with, some of the different ideas that he's probably ready to bring to the program or ready to bring to the offense. So it's, it's kind of interesting. It's like you see a little bit and you get a little bit of a taste of some of the guys and being able to see them open up a little bit, whether it be Deion Burks or some of the newcomers or, just the returning guys, the wide receiver position. But we really, honestly, just haven't seen a whole lot of the offense just in terms of what they're doing day in and day out. And that's why I think Saturday or next Saturday is going to be so interesting when we get down there for the spring game. And, it's going to be a little bit scary because it sounds like in some of the scrimmages that they've had, the defense has been really, really good. And, I think that there's going to be probably a lot of hot takes when it comes to what the offense looks like, and as opposed to what we're going to see come August 30th.
That's definitely one of the best things on social media to check out after the spring game is some of the hot takes, or even if you're feeling crazy enough, head on over to Facebook and you'll really get after it. But Eddie,
I've retired from visiting with those fine folks. It's a little too much.
Eddie, competitive depth has been a big catchphrase for Brent Venables since he arrived in Norman, and it's obvious with the way that this coaching staff has recruited each of the last three cycles that, there are changes being made inside the Switzer Center, particularly on the defensive side of the football. And Eddie, how different is it looking at the guys on this roster now compared to, and I almost hate to say this, but compared to when you were going out there and looking at players that were being recruited, based on the philosophies like from a Kerry Cooks or a Roy Manning, or, I'll even throw Alex Grinch in there as well. When you put out your practice footage, some of the reports that you guys are doing over at Scoop, make no mistake about it, this looks like a more SEC built type football team than what we've seen in Norman over the last even 5 years.
It's night and day. I think that would probably be the best way to just bluntly put it. You look at the safety position in particular, it's just completely changed. I mean, Brandon Hall and what Jay Valai has been able to do, and just kind of the reformation of both of their rooms with the safeties and the cornerbacks, it's night and day different. I mean, I think that when you look at somebody like a Robert Spears Jennings, he is physically about as big as I've seen at the safety position, particularly from what they've been doing over the last couple of years, remembering where it was, with maybe the secondary that they were throwing out at the Peach Bowl or something like that. It's completely different from a physical standpoint. And, I think it's certainly exciting to see. It's exciting to see kind of come together, and particularly with some of the guys that not necessarily that they took chances with. I don't think anybody would say that they took a chance with Peyton Bowen, but were actually able to go out and get to campus. And now it's kind of their moment. And you look at the cornerback position, like Des Malone, he comes in and he looks every bit of the part of what you would expect or what you would think. So it's going to be kind of fun to see what those rotations are, who the guys are that are really going to be contributors coming this season. And, even seeing guys like Michael Boganowski, one of the freshmen, or Jaden Hardy, Reggie Powers, all of those guys that are in that, new crop of freshmen, they look the part. They look like guys that could play from day one. Now, they're obviously not going to. There's a lot of depth in front of them, but I think the projection and what the trajectory of what the programs is and how they've been able to recruit and get those guys to campus, it's certainly headed in the right direction right now. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It just has to come to fruition on the field. And I think that's why this year's so kind of interesting and fun, because everything that's new that comes with, the move to the SEC. But at the same time, all of those Brent Venables defenses and the stops that he's made, when you think about all of the guys that are coming back, whether it be Danny or Billy or Woody, every level of the defense, they have the right pieces, and you would expect them to make the jump like all those other teams have made under Brent, under his third year.
Eddie, I told Adam this, and you probably had the same reaction, but I can remember walking into the Peach Bowl in Atlanta in 2019 to watch Jalen versus Joe Burrow, and just watching the teams go through warm-ups and looking at the size and stature of some of the LSU guys compared to what we were, getting set to deploy on our side. I just remember turning to my dad and saying, this is going to be a long day. And it kind of feels like those times we're no longer living in that era where Oklahoma's, I don't want to say that they're not playing catch up anymore, but they're definitely closing the gap in terms of the size, stature, and the level of physicality. We'll see if Oklahoma can match that now.
No doubt. And I think that, you do walk into some of these bowl games that some of the places that Oklahoma's been, and it's almost kind of looked like they're two different teams playing two different sports just in terms of the size of these guys. And I think that, you need to get, to put it simply, getting the David Stones, the Jaden Jacksons, Daniel Akinkumis of the world. There's a difference. I mean, those guys are, they're kind of ahead of the curve, obviously for a lot of reasons, but fundamentally because they're bigger, faster, and stronger than everybody else, and they're really good football players. So it's been fun to see. They've really done a good job of recruiting and evaluating and getting guys into campus that maybe previous staff probably wouldn't have recruited, just straight up would not have given them the time of day. And, I think that it's going to take a couple years to really see those fruits of the labor pay off. But it certainly seems like there is a progression that is moving in the right direction. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see, even guys like a Samuel Mosigo or a Lewis Carter, that kind of ilk of guy is it's going to be a lot of fun to see them develop over the next couple of years. And certainly I think we only got a little bit of a taste of what Kip Lewis can bring to the defense. Those guys, those are the guys that I'm really excited about. And I think it kind of proves that, Brent might know a thing or two about evaluation and finding football players.
A lot of guys there that certainly look the part. On the offensive side of the ball, there's a guy that looks the part in Caden Helms, and he's one that hosts a show with Nick Anderson here on the Red Dirt Media channel. So I know he's outside circumstances have not allowed him to show off what he can do outside of his control, but I know you've seen a little bit more of him this spring so far. I'm curious what he's shown you up to this point.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's crazy because I feel like a complete idiot screaming this from the mountaintops. Bauer Sharp's obviously looked awesome. I think he's, going to fit in quite well at the tight end position. But from just physically and what we've been able to see of Caden Helms, the last couple of times that we've been out there, we haven't seen him be able to do a whole lot. He might be doing stuff during team that we just don't see. But physically, like if they can just keep this kid healthy, I think he's going to be a really good tight end one day. He looks great physically. He, obviously I think Brent brought it up about a week and a half ago, maybe talking about, you can tell when he's out on the field, he runs a little bit differently than everybody else. It seems like if you can just keep him healthy, and I know a lot of it's been a little bit of bad luck in, kind of the early stage of his career. I think he's going to be a really good football player. And I remember Josh talking about it when Oklahoma signed him out of high school. It's a really unique skill set. And I think that with what Oklahoma wants to do with the tight end position and as active as that group could be and kind of the transformation that room has made, I could buy into thinking that the tight end position is a strength for Oklahoma. And, obviously we're going to have to see how they get when they get out on the field, but Bauer Sharp and Caden Helms and, obviously Devon Mitchell, whenever his time comes, and when it comes, he's going to be somebody that, competes for a Mackey Award, does all that kind of stuff at the tight end position. I think it could be really exciting. And that's not even to mention Jake Roberts, who's probably the most experienced coming in from North Texas, as well as kind of my man crush. And I think it has a lot to do because I went up and saw him play high school football, but I think Cade McIntyre is just a damn good football player. And I don't see a reason why he can't get onto the field in some form or fashion.
Eddie, I think that that's probably one of the best endorsements of a guy like Joe John Finley and even a guy in Seth Luttrell where, and again, this is absolutely, not us taking a shot at Austin Stogner, fantastic player, did a lot of really good things for Oklahoma. But I think that when you look at the overall makeup of the tight end position, Sharp, Mitchell, Roberts, Cade McIntyre, we often forget about to go along with Caden Helms. It almost kind of feels like the tight end has gone from being a liability on offense to where it could potentially be a true strength of this offense going forward this upcoming season. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Eddie, I kind of want to change gears here a little bit. I want to talk to you about Oklahoma's transition to the SEC and how our fan base, in my opinion, don't clip this, Adam, but in my opinion, I don't think that the Oklahoma fan base is equipped or ready for what's about to hit them in a few months. And I'm not even really just even talking about football, even though that's what a lot of people are going to focus on. But, I've been to College Station for, Alabama A&M and Kyle Field. I've been to, an LSU Texas A&M weekend baseball series. And, we all remember the trips to Knoxville, and, it's not just football where the atmosphere is next level. It's every single sport where it really does just mean a little bit more in that part of the country. So are Oklahoma fans ready for this? And maybe the better question is Norman ready for this?
Well, I'll start with the fan base. I think that it's something that, is always kind of tricky because I think that we do live in a little bit of a bubble all the time with the Oklahoma stuff. And, I remember just talking to people when they come into town, whether it be for the bigger games or for the smaller games. I think that there's an element because we grew up and going to the games and you're around it all the time. And you kind of forget that the power of the fan base or just kind of the prestige that Oklahoma football is in general and a Saturday down in Norman and how, teams that come in or fans that come in, they want to go to a game at Oklahoma. They want to be able to go to the stadium, which, I think for a lot of us, we'd go, yeah, the stadium atmosphere is, it's okay. It's not anything great. But then you have somebody that's come in and never gone to an Oklahoma football game before, and they come away saying how great the atmosphere was. So, I think we are kind of jaded in how we look at these types of things. But I do think that at the same time, there is a certain level of fandom. And I think that when you look at what, Arkansas gets on a Tuesday night for a baseball game over at Baum or, down in Starkville or Gainesville or wherever, there's a ways to go. And especially when you're not talking about football, when you're talking about some of the lower sports or some of the just not football sports in general, I think that there is a little bit of a rude awakening maybe that's going to need to happen. But at the same time, I do think that, it is probably one of those things that I think the fan base is going to be rejuvenated a little bit, certainly reinvigorated when you look at the schedule, particularly with football this year. Home slate wise, it's probably the best home slate Oklahoma's had in about a decade, maybe more.
Yep.
And, I think the name recognitions probably has a lot to do with that. I think that, certainly the SEC in the first year is going to have a lot to do with that and just the interest in getting people down to Norman. Kick times are going to be much different, or, I think that we hope that they're much different moving forward. So I think that they're ready to a certain extent, but I think that there will be a little bit of a rude awakening when you're talking about making the trip to Auburn or making the trip to Oxford or making the trip to Baton Rouge or Columbia, a place that probably local fans have already gone to see Missouri. It's just a little bit different. And I don't even really know what to expect because, I think I've only been to a handful of SEC sites. So it's kind of interesting. I think that there is a certain level of anxious anticipation, if you will, within the fan base to kind of get this thing started and see where everybody kind of stacks up. But at the first time that, you go on the road and all of a sudden you turn the ball over 3 times and you're having to get out of Auburn or wherever, kind of with the skin of your teeth, it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to hit a little bit, maybe a little bit harder than, having to crawl out of Ames or, wherever.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to use Lawrence as an example, but I guess the trip wasn't exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I get what people are saying when they say that like Oklahoma fans aren't ready to a certain extent. I would agree, but I also think that, particularly for us that are around it all the time, like you guys are, it's a little bit different. And I do think that we're a little bit jaded in a way of looking at what the actuality is as opposed to kind of what the reality is.
$1 million question for you here, Eddie. Now that you've seen some spring practice and looking, ahead to the fall season, the infamous line from FanDuel, 7.5 is what it ended up at, right now. Now that you've seen some practice, are you feeling better, worse, or the same? Because I know early on you were kind of like, yeah, that's probably a little bit low. How do you feel at this point?
Where the line is right now, I kind of feel like it's probably right because you're talking about 7.5. You're probably talking about a couple swing games. Maybe they go Oklahoma's way, and all of a sudden you're looking at a 9-3 season. I could buy into, like, if I was going to stand at a window right now, just being a complete degenerate and just hoping that my mental health capacity is in well-being, and by the end of the season, I'd probably take the over. But after they got through spring, or now that they're getting to the end of spring, I think it's probably a little bit more of I could maybe see where they're coming from when you're talking about an offensive line that still needs to come together. Now, if you're able to go out and get a couple guys in the portal and all of a sudden, the light comes on for a couple of these guys, and I think that maybe they could go over, and it could be one of those things that we go back and look at it and it's like, what a laugher that was. They missed it by 2 games or something. But at the same time, I do think that there is a reality that there is a fairly serious concern when you're talking about an offensive line that really needs to take some strides here over the next month before you really get into the swing of things.
What do you think we should consider a good season in the new landscape of college football? Because I know Tyler has said he's predicting 8 wins this year. To me, that's a huge disappointment. I'm still readjusting, that we should win or probably will win less than 11 games most years. It's like, maybe not just this year in general, but the future of new college football, like what should be considered a good year?
I don't know. Is it kind of obnoxious if I say that, at a school like Oklahoma, I think that 10, 11 wins is always going to be kind of that barometer, that goal of where you need to be. I think now, is that a reality? No. Probably not. Like, I think that, like, if you were to go 9-3 and all of a sudden you're backdooring into a 12-team playoff, particularly for like a team like Oklahoma this year, as an example, that would be a fantastic year. I don't know anybody right now that wouldn't sign up for something like that, especially with the unknown of, the various position groups and Jackson Arnold, just in terms of making that jump. I think everybody feels like he's going to be fantastic. He's going to be the next great Oklahoma quarterback at some point over the next couple of years. But to say that it's just going to happen overnight like that, and you're going to look back and say, yeah, the guy who threw 40 touchdowns and 3 interceptions or something like that, I just don't think that that's realistic. He's going to make mistakes this season. That's why you fall back on a defense that has so much experience. So I think that like 9 or 10 wins, especially as you make this jump into the SEC, I think that would be fantastic. Maybe on the low side, 9 wins, and everybody feels pretty good about themselves. I think that when you start creeping into like 8-4 or 7-5, that's where you start getting into some pretty unserious or, uncomfortable conversations about, particularly here in these first couple years about, the program, Brent Venables, everything that's going on in Norman. So it's a really interesting question because I think that it has to have a little bit of perspective on where they're coming from. Even to a certain extent, last year, I don't know about you guys, but I still feel like as disappointing as Lawrence was, obviously, and Stillwater was, and then, obviously the bowl game, whatever, it was a really good year. Like, to come from where they were at 6 and 7, I think everybody remembers how bad they were in Brent's first year.
They overachieved.
You could make the argument that they did overachieve. Now, you look at the schedule, and there's a lot of games that they've won that they should have won. But at the same time, it was so bad just from a fundamental standpoint, from like penalties, from everything that just goes into kind of an embarrassment of a program in that first year. That was at least fixed in year number 2. And, obviously they got a long way to go just in terms of in-game management, which was a step forward in year number 2. I think that stuff's going to continually improve because I think that Brent is somebody that is, organized enough, I guess, as a CEO or whatever you want to call it, that he's going to get that stuff right. Those are like just kind of the knowns. And that's why that first year was so disappointing, because you thought that you were never even going to have to worry about that after Lincoln Riley. So maybe I'm blaming a little bit on Riley still, but in the same vein, I do think that they took a really good step in year number 2.
Huh.
Can you take a step in year number 3?
Yeah. Adam, take it away. This is what we all came here for.
Yeah, now that we got all the football stuff out of the way, we can talk about the real thing that we wanted to get you on the show for, which is the big event this weekend. Pete Hughes and K-State coming back to Norman for baseball. And Eddie, normally what we do when we talk baseball on this show, it's sadly, it's usually me doing forced optimism, which we call Adam's optimism.
It was your sport, Adam.
It was a sport that I was most involved with when I was at OU, but I want the week off. So I want you to give us Eddie's optimism for baseball as things stand right now, why OU fans should be, somewhat optimistic maybe about just this weekend or about the rest of the season as a whole.
The last few weeks have been awful. I don't think there's any other way to say it. They have not performed well. How much of that coincided with the injury to John Spikerman? I don't know. That's probably up for debate. John Spikerman is not throwing balls in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. The good news is, I think there's a chance he plays this weekend and he's back in the lineup against Kansas State, which is kind of insane considering where he's coming from. We were talking about a hamate bone surgery, basically 3 weeks ago. So that would be good news. Now, the OU baseball thing just in general right now is like kind of the damnedest conversation ever, because you talk about a team that obviously has kind of gone through it over the last couple of weeks. You talk about a team that hasn't been very good on the back end. You talk about a team from just a pitching standpoint, probably has been up and down. I mean, you went from throwing a no-hitter a couple weeks ago to getting swept in a doubleheader 24 hours later. At the same time, they're still in first place in the Big 12, technically. And I realize that like TCU is not very good, but you also have the Central Florida sweep, and that's starting to look like maybe one of the better weekends nationally, just in the country overall, with the way that Central Florida is playing. So their schedule probably has not helped to a certain extent. Dallas Baptist a couple times on the schedule. Not the most healthy relationship with the DBU program and OU baseball fans. So it's been kind of interesting to watch. I still think that this team could be pretty good. To say that they're going to be a team that can compete to get to to host a regional in Norman or something like that, I probably think that's a little too much right now. But at the same time, I don't think that like just in the Big 12 in general, there's not I don't think that there's a team that you could point to right now and go, yeah, that team's going to be in Omaha, or they're even going to get to Omaha. Kind of feels like the Big 12 is a little bit open right now. Obviously, there's a lot of baseball to be played, and you have to get to get hot at the right time, all that kind of stuff that happened with OU's team a couple years ago on their run to Omaha. But it's just like it's crazy, because I don't think that I think there is a general sentiment amongst the fan base right now. It's like, this team sucks. That's the way that you get the feeling, especially on the message boards, stuff like that. Far from, I don't think that they suck. At the same time, they have a couple really big weeks coming up, and it obviously starts this weekend with Kansas State. You got to be able to take care of business on the home field, get back into the good graces of winning a series over the weekend. And, it feels like the starting pitching has kind of come together. Braden Davis on Friday nights, Kyson Weatherspoon on Saturday. And I really like Grant Stevens on Sunday. You can kind of piece things together, but that's predicated on somebody like a Brendan Girton coming in and giving you good innings, or a Jamie Hitt. I know it was not good on Sunday in Stillwater, and I probably wouldn't have thrown him into that position. I might have started Kyson Weatherspoon to start the 7th inning, so you don't have to have Girton in there. Maybe nobody walks, and maybe you don't even start that Mario go-round that was the 7th inning for Oklahoma State. At the same time, they have a lot of talent. Like I know that people don't want to hear that when you're talking about a pitching staff that seemingly can't throw strikes, but there has been like incremental steps in the right direction for a couple guys. And I think that if you can just get it moving in the right direction at the right time, everybody knows kind of where that leads you at the end of the postseason. So offensively, I've been kind of pleasantly surprised. I mean, I knew that they were going to be pretty good just looking up and down the lineup. But Michael Snyder's starting to hit the ball a little bit after a spell. Eason Carmichael's kind of digging himself out of a little bit of a slump, but still hitting well over 350. It's been kind of nice to see. And once you're able to get John Spikerman back into the mix, they should be really good offensively. can you just get anything on the back end and not put your pitching staff into really bad situations?
He's got me back on the wagon, Adam.
Now there is like the other side of it is they never figure it out, and who knows? I mean, seriously, like who knows? I don't understand the walk situation though, because you have like Tuesday night was a perfect example of, for the most part, everybody pitched really, really well, and then you ran into trouble. And I think that, I'm not even talking about the Golston stuff as much, because it is what it is. He's a true freshman. He's going to be really, really good someday. He's just kind of going through it as a freshman. But at the same time, you got to be able to get out of these, certainly the midweek games with kind of the spot that they played themselves into. You have to win for RPI purposes. That would have been, I think if Oklahoma, if they would have taken 2 or 3 up in Stillwater, I don't even think that they would have played the UTA game. But they kind of started to put them into a position where you got to get wins. Like you need to start racking up wins. So it's really important over the next couple of weeks, particularly with some of these series that are going to be in Norman. Obviously K-State this weekend. You got Texas here in about 3 weeks. Go out to Provo next week. It's really important that they start stacking series wins. And if you can do that, I think that, as you guys probably know, that's kind of the name of the game in baseball. You win weekends, you're going to like where you're sitting at the end of the year.
Yep.
The game threads on Sooner Scoop are a ton of fun. Good community in there, and the meltdown when Jamie Hitt came in on Sunday was pretty epic. I'm sure I said some things in there too that I didn't really mean, but it's a fun community in there, and there's a lot of conversation just around where this program is heading to the SEC, and you've got some stadium renovations that are on the horizon. But how confident should OU fans feel about this program competing in that new conference?
I think on the field, they're recruiting at a very good level right now. And they got some guys within the program, whether it be, I think that everybody was pretty pleased with Carter Frederick coming in and stepping in what he did before he got hurt and his unfortunate, kind of injury and situation. You look at Jason Walk has been unbelievable. That's kind of like the underlying story of all the John Spikerman injury news is that Jason Walk stepped in and performed extremely well. I mean, he had a 2-run homer to put him up on Sunday in Stillwater. That's not normal for a freshman. He's going to be a really, really good player. And, even a guy like a Jacob Golston, I know that like the 2 appearances that he has made this year have not gone well. I think he's recorded 1 out. And that ball probably should have been out in right field, if we're being honest, on what was that, Tuesday night. But at the same time, like they have guys that they're getting in. It's going to be important, I think, just from maybe an aesthetic, just showing up to the ballpark type deal. They got to do something without doubt. They got to start those renovations. And I think that, a lot of that stuff is still on schedule here coming up, I think at the end of this season to hopefully be ready for the start of next year when they do start SEC play. But, if you're a college baseball fan and you haven't gone over to Baum or you haven't gone down to the box in Baton Rouge, there's a number of places. I don't know if you can put up with the Whistler over at Vandy, but it's a different world when you're talking about like it's OU softball, but for baseball in those at those other schools. And I think that, they've set attendance records over about last year and a half. And they've actually been really, really good crowds. I've been pretty impressed with people coming out to the Dale. But at the same time, I think that there is, certainly a hunger and a passion that probably doesn't meet what the everyday fan base has. And I think that, we kind of saw that firsthand up in Omaha a couple of years ago when you look up and it was basically a sea of light blue up at Schwab Field in Omaha. So it's got a long way to go. But I do think that, like, I'm not somebody that sits around, and I'm sure that you've seen as I put in some of the threads, I don't think it's anything that they need to run Skippo out of town or anything like that.
No.
From a recruiting standpoint, I think they're doing a phenomenal job. It's just about getting these guys to not only develop, but be contributors when they arrive to campus. And, it's been a pretty good run here with this group, whether it be with the Jackson Nicholas, John Spikerman guys. They've had some unfortunate luck just in terms of losing guys to the draft. Obviously good news for them. But at the same time, if you could have just had a couple more of those guys stick around, maybe it would have, certainly helped the cause. And you wouldn't have to, be breaking in a bunch of new arms every single season like they have been over the last couple.
I want to ask you about basketball. Two quick questions here. I think if I
keeps going down.
Yeah, we keep going down.
Yeah.
We'll talk wrestling next. No. As far as basketball goes, if I saw this correctly, I think the North Park proposal vote got delayed, if I saw that right the other day. And so there's still no resolution. We've been waiting for years on that anyway. So what's one more month? But there's lots of debate on the message boards too about that. Is like, is it the right move to go off campus? Is it even the right move to go to Moore? Which that's not real. But in my mind, and I guess the question to you is like, any step in any direction is the right direction, right? At this point, whether it's off campus or if they find a place on campus, like any step is a good step in the right direction, I believe.
As long as it's not the ONC, Adam.
Yeah.
They have to do something, guys. I don't know what the answer is, but it's not continuing at Lloyd Noble Center. And it broke my heart in a way to see the unveilings or whatever you want to call it today from the men's and women's programs of the locker rooms. It's just like, why dip the money into that when even if it is a small percentage, dip it into a new arena at some point. And
it's the Blake Griffin Performance Center all over again.
Yeah. It's like putting putting a Band-Aid over a stab wound, basically.
Right.
It doesn't seem like this is something that can continue. And I think that just in terms of overall, whatever you want to call it, interest within the program or whatever. I mean, certainly making the NCAA tournament, taking the next step and, actually getting there is very, very important. And I think that, to a certain extent, the Lloyd Noble Center, when it does fill up and they have big atmospheres, it's fine. I mean, it's good. But at the same time, I think that when you see the kind of the injection of, interest or whatever you want to call it that we've seen in Waco or Austin, and a lot of that has to do because they've been pretty damn good over the last couple of years. It's just night and day different. And I think that, it would at the very least, I don't know, maybe it's a scapegoat thing right now that, because Oklahoma hasn't made the NCAA tournament for the last 3 seasons, maybe that's like become a bigger focus rather than just putting a basketball team on the court that can actually go out and compete. And, that's why this year was so kind of, in a way, I think like almost hard to stomach and to a certain extent when everything went down on that conference championship weekend and the reality kind of set in on Sunday night that Oklahoma was going to be left on the outside was that it felt like this, okay, you can finally start progressing. You can get into the NCAA tournament. That was always kind of the barometer on what season number 3 needed to be. And then when you didn't get there, it was like, well, shit, what are we supposed to do now? Like it was kind of a little bit of a failure. And now you're having to look back into the portal. It's not a healthy conversation because I think it kind of drives people that follow OU basketball insane. But I guess the glass half full side of this is they have great opportunity right now in the transfer portal with guys that have connections back into the state. They're bringing in Sean Padula this weekend from Virginia Tech. I think that everybody that is looking at the situation right now goes, you got to get that guy. It starts with him, build around him, and we'll see what it is. Like maybe the roster could be better in a year from now if you're able to get some of these guys that have connections back into the Sooner State within the program. So it's a tough conversation, and it's an even tougher conversation when you talk about Porter Moser and kind of what he's entering into, because I do think that it's a little bit of a make or break year for him next year, just in terms of making the NCAA tournament and at least showing some progress in kind of what this program is. It seems like every time that they get one step ahead, they take 2 steps back, whether it be not making the NCAA tournament or the, just kind of the freak injuries that happened at the end of the year with Rowe and, certainly JV McCollum and then Hughley on back into, that kind of started at the middle of the season. So it's crazy. They need a new arena. I'm right there with you guys. It's just, I almost kind of wonder sometimes if the arena conversation becomes louder and louder because of the, lack thereof of what they've been able to do on the court. And I think they all kind of go hand in hand. It would be fun to get a new arena. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an old building. I know that there's a lot of people that have memories of Billy Ball and all that kind of stuff that were in there. We were all in school when, Blake and everybody else, it just, at some point you got to say bye. It's been good.
Adapt or die.
Yeah. They're never, I don't believe for a second that they would ever move the arena to Moore, Mustang, or Yukon, or wherever. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that they would do something like that. But anything is kind of better than what they have right now. And I I thought the Fieldhouse stuff was awesome this year. I understand that there's some some steps that would have to be made, and you couldn't do it all the time, but there's no reason for some of these games, especially in November and December, particularly early December when guys are out on, when students are out on spring break or Christmas break, did not play some games over there. I mean, it's embarrassing to walk into the Lloyd Noble Center on a Tuesday night at, December, 8th or whatever. And there's literally like 700 people there at 5:30.
Well, I think that's one of the hard discussions that we've kind of had on this podcast, and really, it's Sooner nationwide. Is how short of a leash or how hot is the seat that Porter Moser's in right now? Because there's a lot of conversation out there right now since Oklahoma did fail to make the NCAA tournament for the third consecutive year. Do you fire Porter Moser? But at the end of the day, I mean, I think the Porter Moser, we can sit here and say, I think he's a good basketball coach. But if you let him go and you bring in somebody else, know that Kellen Sampson is a hot name out there. That's what a lot of people would like to see happen. But at the end of the day, if no other changes are made, whether it's facilities, whether it's NIL, recruiting, fan engagement, different things like that, the next coach is simply going to inherit everything that Porter Moser's had to work with. So it's kind of a give and take. How do you, make that decision if you're Joe Castiglione? And Eddie, last thing that I have for you, we talked about this over the last couple of weeks. I don't know if it's fair to say that the men's basketball program has kind of been forgotten about by the administration. Obviously, football is your cash cow. When they brought Stoops in back in 99, 2000, you win your national championship. Then the money starts rolling in. Patty doing what she's done. KJ Kindler, with women's gymnastics. I don't want to sit here and say that the LNC is the end-all be-all, because obviously Jenny Baranchek's doing something right over there on the opposite side. But again, I just kind of get the impression that men's basketball, outside of you being able to acquire, an elite player like a Blake or a Buddy or a Trey, when it's not like that, I mean, you're really just kind of, you're 50-50 middle of the pack. And I know that Adam's one that, always believes that Oklahoma, should be part of the NCAA tournament. I think as well, that should be the standard. You make the tournament each and every year. Now, whether or not you make it to a Final Four, that's a whole different discussion at a place like Oklahoma. But it just kind of feels like it's I can see the arguments being made from all parties involved on what is the fix. This is what we need to do. And I'm just thankful that there's people smarter than me that are trying to figure this thing out.
Yeah, I would agree. And, it's kind of it's an interesting conversation to be had because, at all the home games, I'm doing video and stuff. And I usually sit basically right in front of Joe C. And to say that man does not love college basketball, I think would be a lie. He loves college basketball in general. I think, obviously incredibly embedded in what the OU basketball product is, obviously, as the athletic director. But to say that they have maybe put basketball on the back burner, to say that, obviously football or softball or some of these other sports have gotten more attention in terms of, kind of keeping up with the Joneses, certainly with the arena and that kind of stuff. I think that would also be a lie. So it's, I think that hopefully it's a wake-up call for a lot of people. I think that, hopefully that the move to the SEC is a wake-up call for just in terms of a lot of people. I think that, we don't have the schedule right now, but you're going to probably end up going to Auburn at some point. You see what they were able to build and the atmosphere that comes with that. You saw it firsthand at the Moody Center or Foster Pavilion down in Waco. Certainly down in Houston. You could call Kellen and ask him about what that thing has done to their program. Now, it's helped that they've gone out and gotten exceptional basketball players, but at the same time, it's all kind of a bigger project or a bigger product. And I think that, there does need to probably be a little bit more of a reaffirmed commitment from the administration that this thing is headed in the right direction. And, it's so crazy to me, like the conversation around Porter Moser, because I do think he's a hell of a basketball coach. He knows what he's talking about. He's respected in the, amongst his peers and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like I was talking to a couple of buddies watching the game on Monday night. It's like to watch what UConn does in the half court, just from a basketball standpoint, not talking about the talent that they have, which is obvious. It's like I can't believe that I watched 32 games this year of Oklahoma basketball and they were playing the same sport that UConn's playing. Like it's night and day different. Now, obviously the players, it's not even comparable. How much better UConn is than what Oklahoma is. But at the same time, like I get what fans are saying when they say it's a tough watch. And I thought, at the beginning of the season, they're getting up and down. And, Otega Owe looks like a guy that had certainly improved from what he was as a freshman. things were going really, really well, and that 15-0 start is like, okay, like they're going to let them play a little bit. They're going to get up and down the floor and all that kind of stuff. But then when you got into Big 12, when you needed to be able to execute in the half court because you couldn't get up and down and run against some of these teams that could match you athletically, it was tough. It was tough to watch. And even as tough as it was to watch, to know that they were basically a game away from making the NCAA tournament, whether it be the Tech game when you're up 9 with 8 to play, making 4 field goals against Kansas in the second half at home. The list kind of goes on and on and on of those games that if it would have bounced one way or the other, they would have probably been in the NCAA tournament. And who knows, maybe they would have been able to make some noise against a team outside of the Big 12. So it's a crazy conversation to have. It feels like they're close, but it feels like they are so far away as well. I don't know. I have no idea. No idea. That's not good. That's not good. But if they can get Padula, just from, I think I kind of loved the kid when he was over at Edmond. I think that with what you saw with what he was able to do in the ACC, his game clearly can translate into the SEC. And maybe he can kind of become a little bit of a cornerstone for what Porter Moser wants to do here moving forward.
We'll end this on a positive note. Masters starts tomorrow. We're a handful of days away from the Oklahoma Spring game. Adam, you got anything else?
No, I will be focused on baseball this weekend instead of the Masters. So I'll be on that parade. Eddie, hopefully everyone's following all your work if they're watching this on Soonerscoop.com, the Soonerscoop YouTube page, which is producing like a great video almost every day at this point between stickball and the family business and recruiting and practice reports. There's lots of good stuff over there that hopefully people are already checking out. You're on the franchise from 6 to 10. And then my wife informed me of this today. You're on Spotify ads at this point. Is that right?
I have no idea.
Okay. She said it's you and you introduced yourself as Edward for Enjoy.
Oh, yeah. That was
it. Did you like a radio? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're on Spotify ads now too.
Yeah, that's a radio and like a TV spot that we did for Enjoy Vision when I got LASIK a year and a half ago, I think. So,
nice. Okay.
Shout out Enjoy. I
did not expect my wife to bring that up and be like, yeah, I heard Eddie
hilarious.
On Spotify. So you're everywhere.
I don't think I've even seen it. So yeah, I kind of took me off guard. I was like, shit, what did I sign up for that I don't know about? But yeah, I love Enjoy.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us and giving us your time, Eddie. We appreciate it. And hopefully maybe baseball can turn things around. Maybe we can have like a baseball only episode sometime in the future. Might be years down the line, but we need to do it.
I'd look forward to it. It is
get the alcohol out.
Every once in a while, those threads, man, it's just like I'll sit there and just like, why am I even here right now? Why am I at the game? Nothing that happens in this game is going to matter. Everybody's going to be mad at each other and everybody's going to be going at their throats, but in kind of like a sick, kind of messed up way, it's a lot of fun.
That's a great way to put it. And we'll end there. So thanks everyone for watching or listening to the Main Line this week, and we will see everyone next week for the next episode.